Hello and a huge welcome to Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. My name is Rich Steve Beck. I'm the admin and founder of this community. So we've got a fantastic guest for you this evening. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. So our next guest has toured the world. He's sold many, many albums over his 20-year career. He's also won Celebrity Mastermind as well with his specialist subject, Iron Maiden. He's opened the Olympics in front of 200,000 people. He's written his own book as well. He's sold out Wembley Arena. He's also been involved with some fantastic record labels such as Epitaph. And he also did a split covers album with Fat Mike of NOFX and the NOFX gang entitled West Coast versus Wessex. He's also built a studio as well. So a huge, huge welcome to Mr. Frank Turner.
Hello.
Hey, Frank. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Really, really good, thank you. Really excited to see your new studio setup today.
Well, this is going to be the first kind of public guided tour, I think, today. So, yeah, it's going to be good. I'm currently facing away from most of the interesting bits, but we'll get there in good time. And it's still a bit of a work in progress, but yes, this is the studio.
Great stuff. So let's start at the beginning, just to give the audience a bit of a background about you and what you've done in the past. So I've asked engineers over the past few weeks how they started off in music. So to summarize, how would you summarize the last, 25, 30 years? And how did you get into music to start off with when you were a kid? And what were you listening to? And how did you pick up guitar? And how did you start songwriting?
Yeah, well, so my folks, bless them, listened to kind of classical music and church music, and modern music wasn't really a feature. And then when I was about 10 years old, there were these two, in my memory, it was kind of around the same time. It probably wasn't, but like I stumbled across the music of Iron Maiden thanks to a friend of mine's older brother, and was just like, wow. Just because I'd never really heard anything remotely like it. And then sort of same time, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert was on TV live, because this was in 1991, somewhere around there. I can't remember. I was young, but yeah. So and you know, the bill for that was like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and like there were people from Zeppelin, Queen, and obviously Queen, and just loads and loads of amazing bands. One thing I always remember for that is that Spinal Tap was on it, and I didn't know that they were a joke because I had no frame of reference, and I couldn't figure out why everyone kept laughing every time they did anything. But yeah, and that was my exposure to kind of modern music and rock music. And it was a light switch being flipped in my head, and you know, immediately I started bugging my parents to get. I got the Argos starter pack for my next Christmas and birthday. My birthday's right next to Christmas, so where you get like a cheap black and white strat copy, which funnily enough is over there, and a 30-watt amp and a strap and a lead, and you know, started trying to play Maiden. Then I got into Nirvana, which was much easier to play, so got more into Nirvana. Nirvana referred themselves as a punk band, so I started getting into punk rock, and you know, Green Day and the Offspring had their moment around that point in time, and yeah, just started playing in hardcore bands and punk bands from an early age. I started touring when I was 16. And then I played the band called Million Dead for quite a while, who had, let's say, underground success would be a polite way of describing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was cool. And then Million Dead came to an end in 2005, and I decided I was going to make music as a solo artist. Initially, just me and an acoustic guitar, which was quite a shift from what I'd been doing to that point. And a lot of people thought I'd lost my mind. You know, it certainly, like, it wasn't instant recognition or success with that format of music. Million Dead's last show, there were 900 people there. My first solo show, there were 2 people there who were both on the guest list.
No way.
So, you know, it took a dive for a few years, but you know, I'm following my urges as a musician, my artistic urges, and and then since then I've basically got into the habit of touring a lot, and releasing records. I've done 8 records as a solo artist so far, as well as splits and live albums and rarities and blah, blah, blah. But 8 studio albums. And then relevant to why we're here today is that a year ago, obviously, somebody found the off switch for my career as a touring performer and pressed it. And that was the end of that for the time being. I mean, hopefully that's coming back again. We'll talk about that. But among other things, like, I'm getting deep straight away, but fuck it, here we are.
Absolutely, man. Go for it. Go for it.
I have long, thankfully, been able to recognize in myself that a need for like structure and like purpose is really quite important to me and my mental health and all this kind of thing. And at the beginning of lockdown, it was like, I need a project or else this is going to go badly. So, you know, and at that point in time, I could knock out a reasonably decent quality demo on Logic for me and my band to then work on in the studio to make into a release quality piece of music. And, you know, I had Logic and on my laptop. And I just thought to myself, well, might as well learn how to use it properly. And, you know, started diving into the world of YouTube tutorial videos and that kind of thing and figuring out what the release time on a compressor does and things like that. And then, as I'm sure many people watching this will recognize, that it kind of became all consuming quite quickly. But it also dovetailed with the idea that, you know, I sort of, to be blunt, like it would help to have a kind of a source of income that wasn't traveling around the world, cramming people into confined spaces. So my wife and I moved house. We used to live in North London. We now live on the Essex coast, and which is lovely. And one of the things about moving, I mean, part of it was saving money. It's not cheap to live out here than it is in London, but also, you know, we've got the space now for me. The place we got it had this little kind of 2-room shed down the end of the garden that is now a soundproof 2-room shed with a live room through there and a control room here. And, you know, I've called in favors in setting all this up in terms of I have, you know, I've managed to sort of leverage my other career, he said, in terms of like getting deals with kind of Universal Audio, Sennheiser, Neumann, and people like that, you know, in order to kind of get me up and running in this end. But you know, I'm now at a point where like I definitely consider myself a beginner as a producer. Having said that, like one of the things I found really interesting in the process of kind of like doing online courses and all that kind of thing, is that about 50% of it every time is stuff that I definitely already know how to do, in terms of it's about like learning how to listen for frequencies and stuff like that. I know how to do that for years. And secondly, talking about things like arrangement and song structuring, all of that in the bag, done. The stuff I'm learning or have been learning about and will continue to learn about for the rest of my life, I'm sure, is about the technical side of things in terms of, you know, equipment and the craft, as it were. But yeah, since then, so I've been mixing. I mean, obviously, because we've been in lockdown, all that kind of thing, I've mostly been mixing so far, but I've mixed sort of 5 or 6 albums that are out now, which I'm feeling pretty good about. I did a record for Pet Needs. I did one for Beans and Toast, which I actually kind of arranged and recorded as well. What else have I been doing? Good Lord. Keeping busy. Did a record for my wife. I'm doing another record for my wife right now. She's a folk singer as well.
Awesome.
Mixed a record for Johnny Lloyd from Tribes, which has been amazing. Actually finished that today, as in sent off production files. So yeah, you know, I'm definitely still finding my feet, but I've got sessions booked in and I'm feeling pretty good about the whole thing. Yeah, and that's there you go. That was the last 25 years of my life.
That's amazing, man. Weren't Beans on Toast, weren't they part of your story when you started doing the acoustic folky stuff? I understand that when you left Million Dead, so I've checked out, I've had a quick look through your book as well that you've written, and I noticed that Beans on Toast is a band that I'm quite familiar with. So I'm originally a Nottingham lad, so I used to go to Rock City quite a bit. So that was like where I used to go.
Best city in the world.
Oh man, so cool, isn't it? How many times you played at Rock City?
God knows. They told me the last time I was there that I was climbing up the charts of most played there, which I actually don't believe. I think that they were trying to be nice. Simply because if you think about bands like Therapy and the Wild Hearts or the Leathers or crew, they played there. They've been playing there since the early 90s. Do you know what I mean? So, but anyway, the people there and I, we're very tight. We're good friends. So a beautiful spot. Anyway.
So such a good venue. I remember.
Toast, yeah.
But yeah, being so, I know that. Look, reading your book, so they're part of your journey to start off with. So.
Yeah, Beans on Toast is one guy, it's Jay. And Jay used to run a bar in North London called Nambuka, and I used to live in the hallway on a sofa for a period of time. And at the time I was in punk bands and they were doing kind of indie club nights. And then Jay would just kind of usually wrap up the party with a lock-in where he'd get out a guitar and play these little folk songs on an acoustic guitar, and they were startling in their immediacy and their art and their humor and their pathos and all the rest of it. And it kind of opened my eyes and ears a fair bit in terms of the idea of being a solo act and playing acoustic and quote unquote folk music and all the rest of it. But yeah, Jay's done a lot of records. He releases one record a year. I mean, he's definitely is an eccentric and unique human being, but he, having done many records, and a lot of the time it's just him and his guitar, he came to me. It was very coincidental. Last summer, he called me up and asked to be interested in working on a record with him. And this was just as I'd really committed to getting into engineering and producing. And I was like, yes, that is a thing I would like to do. And it was really cool. He came around my old house and he tracked vocals and kind of scratch vocals and guitar to a click track for 9 songs. And then basically said, have at it, like, do what you want. So I then really had fun with it. And some of the songs are folk songs and some of them are punk songs and some of them are kind of funk and some of them are country, and just really kind of had a good time. And with that record, I basically wrote and recorded all the arrangements myself. I mean, I farmed out the drums to a friend of mine who's a drummer. I think this, as a lot of people watching this will be aware, this has been an interesting year in terms of the whole kind of like remote recording thing becoming very normalized.
Yeah.
But in a good way. Like, you know, I have a friend who's a drummer who has a kit set up with mics on it, and I send him the stems and he sends me the drums back in and I mix it at my end. But like at no point are we in the same room with each other. And I think that before 2020 and a pandemic, people were a bit more kind of like about doing that. And out of necessity, we've all been doing that for the last year. And it turns out it's actually, there's nothing wrong with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, at least for certain types of projects. I mean, if you're trying to get the kind of live punk band in a room thing, then maybe that's different. But you know, certainly for kind of like auteur projects, shall we say, it's worked really, really well. And but yeah, so you know, just been doing a whole bunch of different stuff like that for the last year. And Jay's record was kind of a really cool, because it was working with a friend. Do you know what I mean? Because one of the things obviously that I'm now getting into is that a lot of the time as a producer, you're working with a band that you don't know, or at least don't know well. And to do my first couple of projects with people who are friends of mine was lucky. Should we say it was a privilege? I mean, because it meant that if I fucked up, then they could be polite about it rather than kind of going, "Your money." So yeah, you know, it was a good start.
Fantastic. I understand as well that you recorded am I right in saying a 4-track EP when you started touring at that moment in time? So when you started doing your solo acoustic stuff, and you go around and catching the train and going all over the shop. What? I'm going to ask you this question. I don't think you said it in your book, but what DAW were you using and what laptop was it at that moment in time?
Oh God, that's an excellent question. I've got a feeling it must have been GarageBand.
Okay.
I mean, very, very basic stuff. And like that, so yeah, so I made like, I mean, I think there was a 4-track version which later blossomed into a 6-track version of like early sketches of songs, and I used to burn them off on the CD burner in my laptop on the train journeys in between shows, and then sell them like £1 a time. And nowadays, one came up on eBay the other day for like sort of 40 quid or something, and it was just like, really? Because it's just a CDR and a paper envelope with my handwriting on it. But and the recording on it is not good. But yeah, I guess that was an early foray into production, I suppose. I've not really thought about that.
Awesome, man. Yes, I know that you said you worked with some world-class, amazing producers that have influenced you now. And as you kindly said, you're going to show us around your studio. So what producers have you worked with over the years that you've really enjoyed working with?
This is a thing you and I were discussing before we came on air. One of my irritations at the moment is that because focusing on the production side of things and the engineering side of things is a recent development for me, I'm now kicking myself because I've made records. I've spent a lot of time in the studio with Rich Costey, who's a world-class Grammy-winning rock producer. I've made records with Butch Walker, who's incredible. Josh and Austin from White Denim, who have Nile City Sound in Dallas, spent months and months and months of my life there. Some of the most amazing gear ever. Alex Newport, a lot of different great producers. And I wasn't really paying attention, and I sat there in a room whilst Rich Costey was miking up a drum kit and sorting out his mic choices and positioning and preamps and all that kind of thing, whilst looking at Facebook, or something like that. And I'm now just like, God damn it. You know, better use of my time to be paying a bit more attention at that moment in time. I mean, some of it has bled through. Do you know what I mean? Like there are certain things that have kind of wandered across, but you know, I could have taken more notes over the years. Let's say that. But you know, and some of those, I mean, have been influences. I mean, to take two examples of the people I just mentioned, like Rich Costi, who I'm actually working with right now remotely, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But
nice.
he's a very meticulous producer. Like his attention to detail is staggering, and it's very much about like doing 19 takes of every guitar part, and you know, really just his detail is staggering. Not miraculously enough, not in a way that sucks the life out of a project. You know what I mean? He makes records that sound exciting, but he is very, very, very thorough, should we say. By contrast, so I made a record with him in 2012 called Tape Deck Heart. The next record I made with Butch Walker, whose approach to production, at least on the record that I made with him, was considerably more quote unquote punk rock, in the sense that, and which was kind of a thing, because the process of recording with Rich the first time was kind of like being beaten up. I'd never been produced as an artist quite like that. Yeah. And it was a harrowing experience on some levels. I mean, it made for a great record, and Rich is a genius, and I'm not doing him down in any way, but it was like, you know, before that I'd mostly made records with my friends, you know what I mean? And suddenly it was just kind of like, but we went with Butch, and I remember like having spent like a week getting guitar tones with Rich Costi. We got in a studio with Butch, and he like rammed the guitar through a Fender Twin, turned everything up to full, put an SM57 in front of it, and was like, don't play badly. And it was like, oh, okay. Do you know what I mean? So there are different approaches to it, obviously, and you know, I think one of the things that I can hopefully bring to the table with my producer hat on is what it's like to be on the other side of the glass. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that sometimes I often feel the producers I've worked with would benefit from, I'm not talking about anyone specific here, but a lot of producers I work with would benefit from a bit more understanding of what the process is like from an artist point of view. Because part of the job of a producer is to get the best out of your artist, you know what I mean? In a very kind of nebulous way. But it's as much about kind of morale and confidence management as it is about where you put your microphone and what microphone it is. And I like to think I have a little bit of experience as to what kind of emotions you might go through on the other side of a glass, and just little things like I was tracking some songs the other day. I've managed to get a COVID safety certificate for my live room, so
nice.
I mean, it is work. It is within the rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, I mean, you have to do it one band member at a time. But I was tracking a drum part the other day, and it was a trick that I learned on the receiving end of it many times, which was just in between a couple of takes, I noticed the drummer was starting to get a little bit kind of like frustrated and annoyed and tired and trying to nail a certain bit. And I just said, I was like, oh, by the way, have you ever heard the story about like the Allman Brothers tour manager or whatever? Just some kind of bullshit story that I've learned over the years. And we just chatted shit through the talkback mic for 4 or 5 minutes. And then we did another take, and he was back in the room. And the point was, is you got to give somebody the opportunity to take a break. But sometimes if you say to somebody, hey, do you need a break? They will take it personally and say, fuck you, I don't need a break. And it's that thing. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. You just sort of learn that there's certain ways of kind of like coaxing an artist whilst kind of not pissing them off or not insulting them, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, that kind of thing's been really interesting. And then just little tricks I've learned over the years that aren't necessarily that's more about arrangement. Things like recording a low double of a chorus vocal line, for example, and indeed double tracking that. So whatever the chorus vocal melody is, you get your singer to sing the same thing an octave down. You double track it, you pan it left and right, you put it low in the mix, and it's, you know, it's, little things like, or Nashville tuning on a guitar. I don't know if you know about that, because Nashville strung guitars are basically the thin strings on a 12-string tuning, which basically means your bottom 4 strings are an octave above where they would usually be. Yeah. And you string a guitar like that. So it's not 12 strings, but it's the top strings of a 12 string. Double track a guitar part with a Nashville strung guitar. And it's like cranking the presence on a take or whatever. It just, and again, you sit it really low in the mix. But little things like that I've picked up over the years, which, like I say, it's not really necessarily about the technicalities of like side chaining or whatever. It's more an arrangement thing, but it makes a huge difference.
texture. It's all about the texture, though, isn't it? The fact that,
yeah.
So I remember recording years ago with an old band. You know, I've written music over the last 20 years, but just like, you know, just done it for fun, really. And so mastering is my main thing. But I remember like a few years ago, went into a studio, and similar to what you just said, that we recorded acoustic guitar, just like standard 6-string, and then the producers basically gave us like a 12-string guitar, and they gave us the octave up strings, and then we used that as a textural element. To do that as well.
Yeah,
and it works.
Well,
it works.
Apparently, that is often referred to as Nashville tuning. So now you know. Stuff like even like inversions of guitar chords. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you've played a guitar part in G shapes. Cool. Now capo 5 and play it in D shapes. Do you know what I mean? And just sit that as a double track in the mix, and it's the same chords, but it's just a whole different range of harmonic information that will be coming through. And like, yeah, there's that thing about like sitting little things in the mix. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not just like a 3-piece band and therefore you've got a drum bus and a guitar bus and a bass bus. Fucking A. Yeah. But like, you know, even stuff like just adding pads to songs. I've got a huge thing about, like, it's a Springsteen trick, but just like adding analog pads to acoustic recordings. You know what I mean? Usually just holding down a root and a fifth all the way through the entire fucking song. Just
it works. It really
does.
works.
You get a synth sound where you've rolled off all possible attack, so there's no click of any kind, and root and fifth kind of around like sort of C3 or whatever on the keyboard, and then just roll that through the whole fucking thing, and it's just like it's like getting a hug. Yeah. So, you know, I've been so this is what I found interesting, is there's just a lot that I can bring to the table that I've learned on the other side of the glass. And it's kind of, I'm trying to say this not sound like a patronizing arsehole, but like, I really enjoy kind of passing that information along, you know, working with younger artists or whatever, and saying, hey, we're going to do a vocal level on the chorus. And they're like, what do you mean? You know, for me now, 8 records in or whatever, that's just standard practice. It's a thing I do every time. You know, or even another trick that I came up with, or that came up, I should say, sorry, the other day, is that whole thing, as I'm sure many people watching this will already know, but the secret to heaviness in like a rock or even a metal recording is actually, in my opinion, to back off the distortion. Like, the more you kind of put that Swedish on things, the more you sound like you've got a wasp trapped in a jar, and you lose all definition, and it's not heavy. So you want to have maybe 1, maybe 2 guitars playing that, but just fucking play it on a clean telly with the on the like bridge pickup, and shove that in the mix as well, and you'll get the definition that you lose through your kind of Insano pedal or whatever it is you're using.
It's so cool. I know that so I've played around with a few guitars over the years, but I've got my mate, actually, we went around the timber yard together. My mate actually built me a guitar from scratch, just for fun. So I don't know if you've done this before, but literally just turned around to me, just went, okay, so what do you want to do? So we've used like a Jazzmaster neck with a Firebird style body that you built from scratch. We've used I don't know if you used one before, a triple shot pickup that Seymour Duncan do. So you can you can flip between a P90, a single coil, and a humbucker. So you kind of literally on one guitar just kind of flip between those like 3 different sounds.
That's very cool. I like that.
It's so cool.
Let me start grabbing shit from around the studio, because
do it.
One of my other projects in the first lockdown, kind of before I really honed in on this being my thing, I remember I ordered this on like week 1 of the first lockdown. I bought like a build your own electric guitar kit, right?
Sweet.
In fact, I ordered 2 because I fucked the first one up, but I finished the second one.
Awesome.
And the second one, it's this. It's a black SG.
Oh, that's cool, man.
It looks lovely, and I'm soldering not really my thing, and I was extremely surprised when I finished soldering it and turned it on and it made noise. It was like, fucking hell. This guitar is a piece of shit, but it's a very specific piece of shit, and I have actually found myself using it a lot, in the sense that it has a kind of like dirt to it. It's got a kind of grizzle to it, and I essentially use this as a kind of like backup kind of rhythm guitar. Do you know what I mean? Just get, if you're got a rhythm guitarist, again, play it twice on his setup, pan it left and right, not hard left and right. Fucking hell, leave something near center field. But and then I usually just throw them this as well, and just be like, cool. Now I've got a Kemper which I'm running over here.
Nice.
You know, just crank the gain up full, run this through it, and be like, play it again, and I'm going to sit that down the middle, and it's going to glue your other part together, and it's going to sound like a really fucking big guitar, which hopefully is what you want. But yeah, so I've got to hold on, let me put this down and pick my laptop up and start giving you the tour. I have my guitar collection is down here. I mean, this is kind of what I want to have here is essentially a toolbox of standards. Do you know what I mean? So at the moment, I've got a Martin acoustic. I've got that SG I was just showing you. I've got a Dick Knight 1947 hollow body guitar, which is a beautiful guitar. Nice. It's a great jazz guitar, like, you know, like a 335 or whatever. It's got that kind of vibe to it. Got a Fender Tele. I've got a Squire bass, and I've got a Fender Strat over there. I'm planning on adding to that. I want to just get like a Les Paul in there. Maybe a Ricky. The idea being that if a band comes to track, they bring their own stuff with them, but it's like you have the standards. Do you know what I mean? You got the classics. Yeah. It's like, if you're like, this really needs a Strat as a solo, it's like, well, I've got one. You know what I mean? So that's the idea of that. I mean, let's do the rounds. I've got my V-drum set up over here, which I actually use rather more than I was expecting to, just in the sense that, like, well, I find myself, like, because I do a fair amount of kind of, particularly at the demo stage of thing, like using Logic Drummer or whatever to kind of get a part together to demonstrate to somebody how a part's going. And if there's a specific fill I'm going, I find kind of drawing in drum parts on the edit function of Logic to be pretty tedious. And quite a lot of the time, if there's a pattern I'm looking for, I just switch. I've got it rooted in to my USBs as a MIDI controller, and you just turn around, pick up the sticks, and just bang out the fill that you're looking for, and then you tidy it up after the event. Yeah, but I actually find it really useful, and which I've been pleasantly surprised by. On the walls here, I have, and I'm going to do a shout out because I'm an endorsee, but with great pride. It's a new company called Skunkworks Audio who make bass traps and diffusers and sound panels and that kind of thing. And they're fucking beautiful. I've got 6 of them around here and around this end as well. There they are. Yeah. And they're just like, they obviously they do the job, but they also look cool as fuck. So if anybody's, and they're very affordable, and I sound like a salesman because I literally am, but if anyone's looking for that kind of thing, Skunkworks Audio is what you're looking for. They're amazing. Let's continue going around the room. Look, here's the big reveal.
Oh man, those Neumanns, they're beautiful.
Yeah,
really,
so really my monitoring setup in here. So I've got a pair of KH310As. I got the A's rather than the D's because I don't really understand what the whole digital thing with digital monitoring. I mean, just what? So KH310As. I've got some Yamaha HS6s up there as my kind of other option. Do you know what I mean? My other thing that I have for my monitoring setup, which is right here, is a Bluetooth speaker that cost me. I literally spent like half a day trying to find the cheapest Bluetooth speaker that had a headphone input on it that I possibly could, because the whole thing for me is that, like, a lot of the time I'm not going to mix an entire record on a 8-pound Bluetooth speaker, but at the same time it's incredibly useful when you're working on a mix to just flip over. I've got a Xenix controller over here which has got all my monitor and input selections and stuff. Nice. You know, just to flick over to a really cheap shitty speaker, it's really useful. Do you know what I mean? It can give you an impression of whether you've actually kind of blown out your bottom end or whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? So that it's a thing. Rich Costey tends to have a 1980s like boombox looped into his setup, and we'll often flip over to that just to see how it's sounding. And it can show you things that like really high-end monitors might miss because they're too good. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we've got those going on. The Kemper that I mentioned is just here. Rooted in. Awesome. Guitar thing. I love Kempers. I'll tell you what I love even more than Kempers. I'm really enjoying getting the technical side of this, by the way. I hope that's all right.
Keep going, man. It's great.
Yeah. What I love mostly about Kempers is having it USB'd into my Mac so that I can use the Profiler app actually on the desktop. Because I find a lot of the time kind of flicking through the menus and stuff on a Kemper to be kind of annoying. Do you know what I mean? It's all kind of up and down buttons.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And whereas, you know, when you pull up the Profiler app on your desktop, it's way more intuitive for me. And like the library system's better, and just kind of it shows you the whole signal chain kind of, and you can just drag in an effect or whatever it might be. I also have the DI out of that kind of permanently wired in, because any single guitar or bass track that I ever take, I will take a DI at the same time, which I think is really good practice. I mean, quite a lot of the time when I get to the mixing stage, I'll just get rid of it because we've got a good time or whatever. But it just means you've always got the option to reamp if you need to do that.
Yeah. So sorry, when you're on tour as well with the band, do you take Kempers with you, or do you tend to take proper like Voxers and Fenders and Marshalls?
I take Kempers. Basically, I only started playing electric guitar in my live band setup 5 years ago, and I played electric on a few songs on the record, and kind of lazily live had just been, well, I play acoustic live. And then there were a few songs where like, this is ridiculous, I have to get an electric. My sound guy, Luke, my live sound guy, who is the best in the business as far as I'm concerned, he very strongly encouraged me to get a Kemper, which I did. And then since then, the rest of my band have I mean, my guitar player, Ben, my electric guitar player, he's big on his Mesa Boogie amps. So he uses a lot of those, but we've got him split signal into his stage amp and then also into a Kemper as well. The thing with Kempers, when you tour internationally, it's just incredible. I have a set of Kempers in the UK and I have a set of Kempers in the US. And when I fly over for a US tour, I take a USB key with me, and that's my sound. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. And indeed, even like, you know, if I go and do an Australian tour, you can hire a Kemper and shove a USB key in and you've got your sound. And you know, it's been an interesting thing, because I remember when kind of like pods and Line 6 and all that first came out, and people got very excited, and they sound kind of terrible.
They did.
Whereas now that technology has kind of landed, as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, continuing around the room, just to finish the tour quickly. So the kind of center of my studio is a Universal Audio setup, and they've been lovely and very helpful with me. So I've got an X8P here. I have a quad over there as an extension thing. I've got an octo accelerator there. I've also got the 4710D here, which is you know, is
nice
on there. And then I've got the 6176 here, which, as I'm sure you know, is a 610 preamp and an 1176 compressor in one unit, which is very nice. So and indeed, then there's the plugins and the Unison plugin, and indeed just console for UAD is incredible to me. It's such a cool way of working. I find myself more often than not actually using just the SSE channel strips on console. I just find it really. Sorry,
is it the E or the G? Do you use with the channel strip?
Yeah, I use the E series actually. Okay. But I mean, I guess my point is more like I'm really comfortable with the channel strip, almost more so than like at the very least a plug-in pre. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, I mean there's a preamp in a channel strip, but it's just, you know, when you got and it's the SSE thing. It's led me to the point where I'm really excited one day to try tracking a record on an actual like SSL desk, you know. But it's that thing of kind of like, it's just very sort of like all in one place. You know what I mean? You've got a gate and a compressor and expander and an EQ unit and high pass and low pass filters and all that sort of thing in one place. I like it. It makes me happy. But yeah, so I have 16 channels in my live room coming in here, and then I have with the X8P and the quad down there as well. I have 16 channels on my console as well. So I could, in theory, record 16 channels at the same time. Thus far, I've topped out at 13 channels on a drum kit. I was trying to get to 16 almost. Do you know what I mean? It was like, come on. And I couldn't quite justify another 3 channels. It was like, I've already got like a flash mic. I've got rooms, I've got overheads, I've got everything fucking close mic'd. It was like, I can't get to 16. But yeah, so UAD stuff is a big part of my thing. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you, and this is the end of the guided tour, I promise, before we start talking
go for it.
Microphones.
Excellent.
Yeah, one of the things when it comes to mixing, which obviously, as I mentioned, is the thing I've been doing more of, I got more and more interested in the idea of kind of like adding some analog kind of summing warmth to it. Now, I know that there's a bunch of kind of like rack-mounted kind of analog summing mixers out there, which I was kind of interested in, but I felt like I was interested in also having like a desk setup. And after spending a lot of time researching this and talking to people and posting on Gearsluts forums and whatever else it might be, got in touch with a guy called John Oram. who used to design for Trident. He's the guy from Trident. And him and Malcolm Toft, and there's this huge like soap opera about what happened with those two, which I heard a lot of and probably can't repeat most of.
We've heard stories as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, John Oram is a lovely guy. He's getting on a bit now. He lives in Kent, and I ended up, I inquired on his website and ended up on the phone with him like half an hour later, and he just talked for England for hours. It was amazing. It was lovely, but like he was telling me all about that whole shenanigan. But essentially it's an 8-channel analog desk, and my initial intention was just to use it as a summing mixer. So when I'm finishing my mixes, I've got 4 stereo buses, let's say, that I can send out. I mean, it's got some stereo inputs on there as well, but so I've got a signal path which has an analog insert and has an analog Trident EQ on it. So I tend to do that. I tend to sum out to that when I'm mixing, and then take the output of that into my special weapon, which is a Tegeler Creme. Don't know if you've come across the
nice. Yeah, I've come across it. Yeah.
Love it, absolutely love it. It's just it's a kind of bus compressor and an EQ in one unit that was surprisingly affordable. So that whole kind of combo just adds a bit of kind of analog grizzle. I'll be generally in the box up until that point at the moment, and then take it out for a little bit of analog final end. As you and I would start to talk about just before we came live on air, I am now, of course, obviously starting to get interested in getting a bit more kind of analog outboard involved in my setup, whether it's getting some kind of I'm looking at some Warm Audio 73 pre's kind of thing. Possibly getting like an actual kind of LA2A rather than the plug-in, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's difficult because at some point I am supposed to actually be making money out of the studio rather than just fucking spending
it. It's the way it goes.
What am I going to do? But yeah, so that's the setup in here, which I'm very pleased with. I mean, as I'm saying, I'm going to tweak it, I'm going to add to it and all the rest of it, but I'm pretty happy with how that's all coming along for now. On the other side of, I'll show you just now, behind my, hold on, there we go. There's a window there.
Yeah.
Which goes through to my live room. My live room, which is big enough to set a nice big drum kit up in. Possibly not much more than that. But essentially, I guess what I can do, let's say I have a 3-piece rock band, I can have the drums live in there, but I can have the guitarist DIing into a Kemper in here. I've also over here, I've got a Sansamp RBI rack mounted as well for bass, because I fucking swear by Sansamp for bass.
Yeah, great, so good.
Yeah, and again, you can split the signal, so you can have a clean signal and a treated signal from an RBI. But so I could have a band actually in there, like drummer, bass player, and guitarist playing together. Take DIs off the guitar and bass, and then probably either reamp or just retrack, probably.
Right.
I mean, thus far, I'm not actually allowed to have 3 people in there with COVID restrictions, so I haven't actually done that yet. But you could also quite happily have like a folk band, like a folk duo, let's say, set up in there or whatever. So it's kind of, it's not enormous. It's not like I've kind of built Abbey Road down in my garden, but it's kind of a nice functional space. And 16 channels coming in, and then I have my mic locker in there, which we should talk about next.
Let's go for it. Show us.
So, I mean, well, it's all next door, so I'm just going to tell you about it. But as I mentioned, so Norton and Sennheiser have been amazing. My friend Andy there has been really sorting me out. So I've got a U87 as my kind of like workhorse LDC. Great mic. And, it's got a lot of different patterns on it, which is really useful. And it's just kind of a go-to. So big fan of that. I've also got I've got a load of Sennheiser, the 900 series. So 906s for guitar amps. I've got 901, 902 for kick. What else have I got? And 904s for toms, 914s for SDCs for hi-hats, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's that crew. I'm also running, I've got some Rode NT5s in there, which is a nice couple of matched pair of pencil condensers, which I'm quite a fan of. My newest addition was a Gemini, an SE Electronics Gemini, which is my first Valve mic in my collection. And I told Rich Costi about this on text message, and he sent me a reply that said, RIP your wallet. The point being that once you get into kind of tube and valve technology for microphones, you might as well sell your house.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's like one day I'm going to own a vintage U47, but at that point in time, I might be homeless. But yes, I've got that. What else do I have? I've got SM7B, which I'm a big fan of. That's the thing.
Nice.
Again, going back to what I was saying, as an artist, I have noticed over the years that more often than not, I will end up tracking my vocals through an SM7B. So picks up one of those. And then, I've got SM58s and SM57s kind of lying around and bits and bobs and that kind of thing. And then the last bit of my collection, which is arriving tomorrow morning, and I'm very excited about it, is a matched pair of AKG C414s, nice. which sort of feels like the missing link. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got some 421s as well. Sennheiser 421s and a Sennheiser 441, which is my favorite snare mic. And I think I've lost Rich. I was just rabbiting on anyway. Hopefully other people can still hear me or something. Or maybe I'm now hosting Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer and banging on and on and on about microphones. Hopefully he's coming back. Come on, Rich, Steve. What else do I have next door? I have a percussion box, which I like. Oh, that's another thing I've got next door. Is this working? Let's just double check at mine. I've lost Rich. I'll keep hosting the podcast. Next door, but my other toy that I have next door, I haven't talked about keyboard instruments. I have a Roland FP30 just down here underneath this, which is a great controller keyboard to use kind of Rhapsody plugins, that kind of thing. It is now just me running this show. I'll keep talking. Fuck it. Yeah, so next door I have this amazing thing. A friend of mine is a furniture.
Sorry, Frank. Back again.
I was just
sorry. Amazing. Sorry,
I was just banging on anyway.
Keep going. It's all good. Sorry, slight disconnection. We're live. So hey.
It's all good. So sorry, what I was about to say. I've got a friend who's a furniture restorer. He used to be in kind of punk bands and stuff, and now he's a furniture restorer. Who knew? But he called me about 6 months ago and said, "I've got a 150-year-old harmonium."
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like a pedal operated pump organ.
Yeah.
And apparently this thing was in like a girls' Catholic school for 150 years, and they've just got rid of it. He bought it off them, did it up, and then sold it to me. And I mean, I'm in danger of making like a harmonium focused album at some point in the near future because it's so cool. I mean, most people know it from the last track on Kid A by Radiohead, which is called Exit Music for a Film. That's a harmonium on that track. So it's a beautiful instrument. And yeah, quite a lot of the things coming out of here right now are going to be quite harmonium focused.
Amazing. That's so cool.
That's my studio tour complete. I've talked an awful lot now. As we were saying just before we came on air, I've gone through this whole process of learning about production, all the rest of it, or beginning to learn about say whilst locked down with my wife, who is incredible and who is a folk musician and who doesn't give a fuck about preamps or patch bays or any of that kind of shit. And so being able to actually talk about this stuff is really quite pleasing. So thanks for hearing me.
Right. No, mate, it's been fantastic, Fred. It's so cool to see you in studio. My question for you is, what do your neighbors think of this? Are you quite far away from your neighbors? I know that you're all padded out,
Yeah, so basically the first thing is like, I mean, the first thing I did when I moved to this area and found this kind of space was to get it really like properly soundproof. So behind these walls, there's, it's a room within a room type setup. There's like rock wall and suspended flooring and all that kind of bollocks. Which obviously I got somebody to do for me because Jesus Christ. I spent about 5 minutes looking at the kind of you can do it yourself kind of blogs. And then no, I fucking can't. So because that's just not my skill set. But it's pretty effectively soundproof. The thing with that was quite funny. Our next door neighbors have another kind of outbuilding just like this one, literally right next to it. Not connected, but sort of also at the end of their garden. And she's an artist and it's her art studio. So when we moved in, I kind of, we went round to introduce ourselves and I said, look, I'm going to build a recording studio at the end of the garden. I said, don't worry, I'm getting it soundproofed. I really don't want to interrupt your artistic idyll that you have at the end of your garden. And she's in her mid 50s, I'd guess. She said, oh, I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. I love music. And she said, it's not like you're going to be recording, like thrash metal or anything. And I was like, oh. Well, funny you should say that. But it was funny. So obviously the guys did all the work. They were amazing. A company called London Sound Solutions, if anyone's looking for somebody to soundproof them. Absolutely phenomenal company, London Sound Solutions. But they did a great job. But of course, we didn't really like road test it at any point. They do this all the time. They were confident in it. But I had a day when I was like, I mean, I hope it works. Do you know what I mean? It was finished.
Yeah.
And when I had my first full drum kit session next door, which was for a band called Pet Needs, I had the drummer come in and track his parts. And he's pretty fucking heavy drummer. And I was thinking to myself, you know, I put him in, I shut the double doors, you know, went next door and was like, oh, I hope this isn't going to be loud as fuck, and told him to get going. And then I stepped outside to kind of, you know, check the sound.
Test it out.
It was really, really impressive. When you were within kind of 5 meters of the building, you could tell that there was a drum kit playing in there, but it was pretty fucking quiet. And any further than that away, and there was nothing doing. So thankfully, I have the ability to make a lot of noise in here.
Amazing, so cool. Hey, so what about your? So I've noticed. Have you done all like the foam padding as well around you, or is that the company that did all that?
No, that's the thing I've been doing myself, which, to be honest, could probably do. I will do some tweaking over time. That's I'm sure you're aware, like the entire world of like acoustic treatment as opposed to soundproofing is a whole fucking other thing. Skunk Works Audio, to mention them again, have been fantastic at providing the bass traps that I need, and I obviously did all my measuring and angles and all that sort of shit and reflection points and stuff. Also, a shout out to the guys at Prime Acoustic, Prime Acoustic, I don't know, who sorted me a deal on some of the Cumulus bass traps. You can see one behind me in the corner, which are fantastic. Nice. Beyond that, I've got just a lot of kind of foam, diffuser foam and foam, which I've been putting in strategic places. I can't now remember what it's called. There's that program you can buy which kind of tests your room for you with a test mic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll be able to tell you in a minute. Yeah.
Sonarworks. That's it. Sonarworks.
It sounds like, I don't know if you remember that. I'm sure you've done it before, but it sounds like to me like the Nintendo Wii. You know, when you're testing it with the speakers, it makes that really sort of strange, like high pitch sounds. Almost. Yeah. It's literally, it sounds like a video game, doesn't it, when you're doing it?
Yeah.
So, technology is crazy, man.
It is crazy. And I've been looking into getting something like that in the system here, and or just getting somebody who actually knows more about that shit than I do to come around and make some suggestions. I mean, at the moment, I feel like the room is pretty accurate as far as I can tell, but I'm 100% ready for somebody to come around and go, Jesus fucking Christ, dude, what are you doing? You know what I mean? I mean, actually, the one piece of gear I haven't mentioned, which I really should have done, is
go for it.
Which is my Sennheiser. What are they called? They're called HD 800S headphones. These things are fucking unbelievable.
Yeah, so cool.
And in terms of like accuracy when I'm mixing, obviously I spend an awful lot of time flicking between different monitors, and that's very important. But if I'm really getting into the weeds on a sound, it's headphones on for me. Like, it just wow in terms of the definition and the frequency response and everything on those headphones. They're amazing. So, but you know, in a way, it's like you got those on, you take them off, you listen to it in the room, you get some impression of how accurate your room is sounding with the monitors you have, and it feels pretty good in here. As I say, it could probably be improved at some point, but I guess I'm going to have to wait until I can invite people over.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we've talked to the guests over the last few weeks, everyone has said the same thing, that the trickiest thing, I don't know if you agree, is the sub as well. Getting the sub in the room as well, capturing the bass response is a really, really tricky task. So how have you worked with the bass response in your room?
Well, I think I would say it's that tricky middle ground, because obviously you don't want to have like bass and sub frequency build up in a room, but at the same time you don't want to like kill all the bottom end out of your room and find yourself like churning out ridiculously subby mixes, which actually, funnily enough, as an artist, is a thing I've encountered a lot over the years, is producers sending me mixes and I'm like, dude, turn the fucking bottom end down.
Absolutely.
Because they've just cranked it. And I think there is definitely a part of the audio, well, the rock world, who seem to sort of think that more bottom end means a better mix, which isn't always true. You know what I mean? It's like you want punchy, clear, strong, heavy bottom end, but it doesn't want to be like the whole time. I mean, what I will say, this is where I'm going to now get excited about my Neumann KH310s. The reason I have the KH310s and the Yamaha HS6s is that the HS6s I feel like have a great definition for the high mids and the highs in particular. And there are days when I feel like the KH310s could use a tiny bit more definition at their top end, but what the KH310s have is they have fucking heft to them, and their accuracy in the lower frequencies is remarkable and much, much, much better than the HS6s. But then, so that's why I have both, is that like when I'm doing a mix, I will flick between the two, you know, and try and concentrate on different frequency ranges while I'm doing it. So they've been, I mean, that's the main thing for me. I mean, beyond that, you know, I have my bass straps, I have my corner bass straps as well. And you know, I'm not like on a hollow floor or anything like that. So, you know, hopefully I've got my bottom end under control, but it's, as I was saying, there's always room for improvement on that shit, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. What about mastering as well? Do you play around with any mastering in your room as well as doing a bit of mixing, or do you send it off?
I would prefer to send it off. I, over the years, have been fortunate enough to do a lot of work on my own material with a guy called Frank Arkwright at Abbey Road Studios, used to be at Townhouse. I met Frank when he was kind of first becoming apparent that he was like the king of mastering. And we became friends, and he's always done me a deal where he can and this sort of shit. So, and are you familiar with his work at all?
Yeah.
Frank Arkwright? Yeah, you know, he did like the Smiths remasters, and he did all the Amy Winehouse shit. He does a lot of kind of like amazing music. So if I can, I would much rather a real mastering engineer master my shit, because I'm aware that it's a different skill set to mixing. Some of the projects I work on, people don't have the budget for that, you know, and I have Ozone. Do you know what I mean? I have all of the iZotope plugins at my end.
Yeah.
Big shout out to iZotope plugins. We haven't talked about plugins, Jesus Christ.
Well, we can go there in a sec, mate. Let's do it. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I mean, iZotope stuff is fucking sensational. I had a thing like that. Some of their kind of functional plugins are ridiculous. I had an acoustic guitar part I was mixing the other day that was a bit squeaky, like finger squeaks and stuff. And I kind of got into Melodyning, trying to remove the squeaks on Melodyne. But the problem is it deletes other information when you do that, and it's sounding like a guitar part. And then I was thinking, am I really going to have to go through this and like draw in volume ducts on the squeaks and shit? That's going to be a pain in the ass. And I was mulling it all over. And I have a friend who works for iZotope who sorted me out the plugins there. And I suddenly thought to myself, well, maybe iZotope have thought about this. And I went in, and there's literally a plugin of theirs that's called something like Guitar De-Squeaker or something. It's guitar noise or something. I was like, and I put it on the track. Didn't even change anything from the preset that it opens up with, and my guitar part was fixed. And it was just like, what the fuck just happened? Like it was. I mean, we live in an age where technology is getting pretty crazy as far as recording technology goes. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
So you know, I have a ton of Waves plugins, which I use a fair amount. I have a lot of UAD plugins, as we've mentioned, which I'm a big fan of. For certain things, I'm going to be controversial and shout out the native Logic plugins. I think the native Logic EQ and compressor are pretty fucking good, actually. Yeah. Not necessarily for like a colored task for the compression, but for basic compression tools, the Logic compressor is pretty fucking good in my opinion. Hats off for that, and indeed Space Designer is fucking great as well. Like, and one of the things that I've been learning in the last year is that. And a lot of people say this on tutorial videos, but it's worth repeating. Rather than buying another fucking 10 plugins, learn how to use the ones you already have. Do you know what I mean? Like, actually fucking go through it and stop using presets and like get to grips with the material that you have. So, but yeah, so and then beyond that, I mean, a lot of my go-to plugins, a lot of it is from Waves, but the R series stuff from Waves, the RVox and Renaissance Axe and stuff like that, I find to be like kind of witchcraft good in terms of when, generally speaking, if I'm mixing a vocal, I will just put an RVox on it at the front of the chain anyway, just to kind of bring it up to spec before I start doing kind of subtractive EQ and anything else I might be doing to it. And same with guitar parts and Renaissance Axe, and R bass is fucking amazing as well. So big fan of all of that. Some plugin I've only started getting into recently is Soothe. from Oak Sound.
Dude, Soothe is great. Is it Soothe 2 that you're using at the minute?
Yeah, Soothe 2. Fuck me. Yeah. Particularly because obviously a lot of the stuff I do is kind of working with acoustic guitar stuff. And an acoustic guitar is a really difficult instrument both to record and to mix, in my opinion. You know, to get the proper acoustic sound is quite a challenge. It's something I care about a lot, let's say that. And a lot of the time, using a little bit of Soothe kind of towards the end of your signal chain when you're mixing acoustic can be a really, really effective tool in terms of just smoothing out some of the weirder harmonics that you might get coming off the guitar. I mean, obviously, you want to get your mic choice and your mic placement as right as you can in the first place, but a bit of Soothe at the end of the chain is big fan of that.
Another good one as well is Gullfoss. I don't know if you've come across Gullfoss.
I have not. No.
Yeah, Gullfoss. I'm trying Sound Theory. That is the name of the company for Gullfoss. But it's very similar concept to Soothe as well. But you literally, when I'm mastering, I just flip between the two, and they both do like a very similar task. But it's such a cool plugin. I think it's a couple of $100, but it works really, really well.
I'm gonna investigate that. Let me tell you. Yeah, and then I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, you know, I generally mix with an SSL bus compressor plugin on my master anyway because it just sort of makes it feel like a desk. I like that. There's I can't quite remember who makes it, but there's a saturation knob. Are you familiar with that? I think it's free. And it's just
I know which company you mean. I'm sure the forum will be able to tell us in a minute. Yeah, carry on. Yeah,
it's fucking great. I mean, there's a million saturation plugins out there, but I just find that's my go-to, generally speaking. Big fan of that. I'm trying to think about what other toys that I tend to use a lot of the time. I mean, you know, those are my kind of like standards, let's say. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I feel like the Universal Audio plugins are so fucking good that the further I get into this, the more interested I am in like using one of their Fairchild. I'm a huge fan of their Fairchild compressors. Really, really big into that. And you know, as I was saying at the beginning, I still regard myself as kind of a beginner in this world. One of the things that I'm trying to get into at the moment is using non-linear, non-visual EQs. You know what I mean? Rather than having a graph, because it's that age-old thing that you trust your eyes before you trust your ears, which is a terrible thing to be doing. And I find using, I mean, at the moment, plugins, but Pultex or whatever, I'm still finding it quite challenging finding my way around what the fuck the controls are doing. But at the same time, I feel like, I mean, I probably still use like a graph EQ for like subtractive EQ for finding kind of dodgy peaks and sweeping and taking them out and that kind of thing, because that's easier, I find. But at the same time, for kind of shaping EQ rather than subtractive EQ, I think there's a lot to be said for using, you know, knob-based EQ, should we say? I don't know what the term, like,
absolutely. It's emulations of analog stuff, though, isn't it? Like you said. But have you? So you mentioned about sweeping as well, and kind of you know, doing notches and cues and all that sort of stuff. Have you played around with any of the FabFilter stuff? Have you had a look at the Q3 and all that
yes, I have one of those, which is kind of my go-to graph EQ for shaping EQ. I've got the Pro Q3. The latest one. I picked that up on a recommendation from a friend who knows more about this than I do, who was just like, fucking get that in your toolbox. But it is a funny old thing. It's like it's like the whole world of guitar. It reminds me of the world of getting into guitars. When you're a kid, you get into guitars and you get excited about flanges and phasers and that kind of shit.
It's true.
And you find yourself chasing a 60s Fender Twin. And do you know what I mean? And it's like you actually realize what the important shit is. And similarly, like at the beginning of working on all this, I've got an awful lot of plugins that I don't use anymore. Do you know what I mean? And we're talking about it within a year, but it was just kind of like, oh my God, that's exciting. And now it's kind of like, you know what? Just it's all compression and EQ and reverb. Do you know what I mean? For me, like that's the main thing. Like 9 times out of 10, that's what I'm doing on any given track. I've been getting into delay as a kind of mix tool a bit more recently. Cool. As a guitarist, I kind of figured that delay was kind of for a kind of like noticeable and slightly ridiculous effects, but you start learning that there's a place for delay as a kind of spatial tool within the mix. That was kind of news to me, but I've started getting into that. Another thing I'm trying to get to grips with at the moment is side chaining and parallel compression. Parallel compression is fine. Side chaining is slightly does my fucking head in. But I'm I've kind of grasped the concept at this point. You know what I mean? But just trying to find how to use it kind of judiciously and tastefully and that kind of thing. I'm still getting to grips with it.
So cool. Oh, the saturator you were talking about a couple of minutes ago, Slate Digital, off the top of my head. I think that's the company you were thinking of.
Right. Yeah.
But there's just so many cool things. We were talking to a few engineers about this over the last few weeks that it's really interesting. I know that you use quite a lot of outboard stuff, and you're starting to build your collection, which I'm sure will grow as time progresses. But it's really interesting the fact that these plugin companies, they, not perfectly, but very, very closely, they can get the plugins to sound like the analog gear, which is crazy when you think about it. It's like, because literally like what it is and like how we're talking now, everything as we know on the internet and online and with like software, it's all ones and zeros. And the fact that some music physicians come up with that, it's just mind-blowing.
It's amazing. And this goes back to what we were saying about Line 6 versus Kemper. There are a lot of people who are inherently suspicious of kind of like analog emulation, that kind of thing. And I understand why. I understand that there are places where the human ear can hear the difference and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, personally, I'm fully prepared to accept that there is a point that can be reached with digital technology, which is indistinguishable. If you're talking about the whole analog world, you might be talking about like crosstalk between channels and that kind of thing. You might be talking about, it is the whole thing, Neil Young's whole thing about like digital never being the same thing because there's always steps and a waveform rather than a smooth thing. There is a point beyond which you can't fucking hear it, Neil. It's just true. Just like, fuck off. And with so many of these things, just before we came on air, we were talking about Luna, the new DAW that's come out. Which I'm considering the merits of experimenting with. But as we were saying, like it's still on version 1.0, 1.1 or whatever it is. And just instinctively, I want to wait until it's on 2.0 or 4.1 or whatever it might be when they've kind of had time to work it through. In principle, because I didn't really, initially I was just like, oh, it's another DAW, I've got Logic, that's fine. But actually reading about what they're trying to achieve with it, namely kind of essentially building an analog tape machine type setup, that's interesting to me because I don't actually, with the type of music that I make and the type of music I usually record, I'm not doing a huge amount of programming. There's some, do you know what I mean? And like, certainly I'll use the kind of B3 Hammond sound off Logic all the fucking time. And I tend to use Grand Rhapsody from Waves for my piano, and so on and so forth. But like, most of the time I'm more interested in like recording real instruments sort of thing. And with that in mind, it may be that Luna might be an interesting thing for me to check out. But as I say, it might be a couple of generations away from being perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really interesting as well is the fact that we speak to engineers. For example, we had Bob Katz on last night, and this guy's like, he's in his early 70s, and the fact that he's been doing music for 50 years and kind of sat in his studio, and the fact that you can be doing this until the day you die. It's an amazing thing, the fact that eventually, I know that some artists, they might think that, okay, well, I fancy just bit of, not just, but I fancy like going down the route of being, like you said, like a producer now or a mixer and completely changing the way that you learn music. But what I think is fantastic you said, Frank, as well, is the fact, like you said, like with effects, like guitar effects, it's almost like kind of learning like a brand new language almost as well. It's so cool.
I mean, I've found the last year to be just incredibly rewarding for me. And I think, I am in the middle of kind of tracking a record at the minute, which I'm not producing for myself, but having much more knowledge about the technical side of what we're doing, I think is useful, actually. Do you know what I mean? And it enables me to think in an artistic way. Because a lot of the time, both as a musician and now as a producer, like the point about technical knowledge is almost like liberating yourself to be an artist. By understanding what all the moving parts are and what they do, you almost is about getting to a point where therefore you don't think about them. Do you know what I mean? It's like you don't have to worry about the signal path to the sound because it's good, because you understand it and you've put it together yourself. And that means you can just focus on performance or whatever it might be, and I feel the same is true as a guitar player and as a songwriter and all the rest of it. Like the point on some level about technical knowledge is liberating yourself from technicalities. And reaching a point where, I mean, as much as I'm now a person who will forever get excited about watching needles go up and down on analog outboard gear and all the rest of it. Like it's kind of cool to to be able to put that out of mind, and just be confident that it's like, right, I've got a fucking U87 in front of that guitar. It's going to sound good. Now play it well.
Yeah. So let's talk about as well about the future of live music. So obviously you've learned so much stuff in lockdown. Actually, no, but before we do that, what does your day currently look like now that you've been creating your studio? So how many hours are you spending in your studio at the minute, like, per day?
As many as I can. I should, by the way, I hate to do this. I'm going to have to jump off in the next couple of minutes just because talking about my day, my dinner is apparently ready. I've just received it.
Oh, right. Okay. No worries.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, generally, so, my wife refers to this as the mega shed, in the sense that, like, I disappeared down the garden. I mean, it depends what I'm working on. At the moment, I have my wife's record, which I'm working on. I've just made a deal with there's some local guys I've made friends with since moving here who are in a kind of folk duo, and we're talking about making a record together. What else? I finished the Johnny Live record today, going to be working on the next Pet Needs record. There's a band from the States called Band-Aid Brigade who I'm kind of remote producing at the moment, which is interesting, but we did a bunch of demoing, kind of sending files back and forth. They're now tracking the record, and then I will mix it at this end. But I'm also keen to do more. There is going to come a point when the live scene opens up again where I will be busy with that kind of thing. And I guess that in the future, hopefully I will be looking at a situation where I will be spending sort of, half my time here and half my time on the road. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what the live scene is going to look like. I certainly think that people who think that the switch is going to get flipped and it's all going to be fine on the 21st of June are slightly kidding themselves. I think the rest of the year will be confusing. But, we'll see. And hopefully I'll be able to make some great records, both for myself and for other people in the interim.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Frank. So I know that you're going to head off. Thanks so much for your time today as well. It's been fantastic seeing you in studio and hanging out with you today. And your dinner's ready then, I'm guessing. So you need to. Yeah,
I'm so sorry to cut you off, man, but I'm going to get myself in trouble.
Oh, thanks again, Frank. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And you too, my friend. Thank you.